everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you guys are new here. Before we get into the video, I just wanted to make this super short and sweet, but I just wanted to thank all of you guys who have been so incredibly enthusiastic and supportive of my switch to true crime videos. I really didn't think that it was going to go as well as it did, so I wanted to say hello to any of the new subscribers who may have subscribed for the true crime videos, and just a huge thank you to all of my previous subscribers who stuck with me and enjoy the content that I'm giving you guys. So I just really wanted to thank you guys before I jumped into the video. Today's video is extremely heartbreaking true crime video, and I feel like that's something that I'm going to say in the beginning of all of my videos. There's just something about this case that is very heartbreaking, and it is about a 15-year-old girl that I truly believe did not have nearly enough of a voice as she should have had. This story did not make national news in any way, shape, or form. In fact, there was really not even that much on this case to begin with. So today's case is going to be on 15-year-old Erika Hill, who is actually formerly known as the Lake County Jane Doe. So this case actually did originally start off as a Jane Doe, and because of that, there are some interesting timelines throughout the story. So I just wanted to let you guys know ahead of time, we might be bouncing back and forth between the timelines, but I'll let you guys know where things might get kind of fuzzy or confusing within the timeline of the story, just so we can kind of follow along a little bit better. So because the story does originally start off as a Jane Doe story, that's where I'm going to start today's video. So on February 26th in 2007, two brothers were driving in an alleyway in Gary, Indiana, when they came across the remains in a garbage bin basically of a woman, and they thought of her to be extremely burned, but the body was actually partially burned and decomposing when they found her, and they immediately called the police. When they arrived onto the scene, what they stumbled upon was just absolutely horrific. They found the remains of this Jane Doe, and it looked to be that her body was partially burned. And not only was it partially burned, but it also had 170 wounds and scars on her body, meaning that this was a person who endured severe trauma throughout their life. So there were, fresh wounds, but there were also scars that were believed to have been around for years before her death. It's very clear to the police that they are obviously dealing with a homicide. So when they tried to identify this Jane Doe, they had a really challenging time, because when they wanted to do dental records, the person who actually did this horrific crime went out of their way to remove the teeth from this girl so she wasn't easily identified. So because they didn't have a name, they tried matching missing databases for missing persons, and that didn't take them very far either. There were no one to really fit the description of what this child had really looked like, and they really had no leads off the bat. Basically, they tried to composite a sketch to look as similar to this Jane Doe as they possibly could. Now, this Jane Doe had scars all over her face. She clearly, again, just went through extremely traumatic events and was in a horrible condition. So basically, she remained the Lake County Jane Doe. They only had the sketch to try to get people to come forward and recognize her, but there was absolutely no leads, and the case actually ended up basically going cold. Fast forward in the case to 2015, where someone finally came forward stating that they actually knew who this Jane Doe was. Kiara Hill came forward to the police stating that Erika Hill was actually her adoptive sister, and that the mother of the two of them is actually the person who murdered Erika Hill. So right now, 8 years later after this case, this woman comes forward and claims to know everything about this murder. Erika Hill, a little bit of a backstory on her is around 2001, Erika Hill was actually living with her grandmother at the time, And the reason she was living with her grandmother at the time is because her birth mother was in a really poor state when she gave birth to Erika. She was actually addicted to drugs and basically stated that she just couldn't handle taking care of a child, and she gave the custody to Erika's grandmother. The reason why Erika was adopted by the Hills was because when her grandmother died, there was no one else basically to take care of her. Taylin Hill is the aunt of Erika Hill, and she eventually became the adoptive mother of Erika Hill after her grandmother had passed away. And this is when all of the abuse in Erika's life started. Taylin Hill constantly, every single day, abused and tortured Erika Hill the entire time that she had custody of her. She would literally make her stand on one foot with her other foot behind her while she beat the foot until it basically was bloody. She was constantly hitting her with objects. She would starve her. Kiara even told them that at one point when they woke up, they noticed that Erika was a grayish color and was clearly in a horrific state. There was one time where Taylin Hill actually took a hammer and beat Erika's hand with the hammer, and then eventually just decided to take her to the hospital. After she's the one that beat her hand, she took Erika to the hospital, and basically when the nurses and the doctors wanted to put her in a gown and examine her, she literally removed her from the hospital and they left because she didn't want them to see the current state that she was in. Apparently in the early 2000s, so from 2000 to 2005, there were some investigations on Taylin claiming that she was abusing her children because they would be taken out of school. But when family was questioned and when neighbors were questioned, it all seemed fine and dandy with Taylin. So in February in 2007, Kiara and her family members, so I believe it were her brothers, came home to the mom frantic. So Taylin had called them absolutely frantic over the phone and said that they need to get us home as soon as possible because there was a family emergency. So Kiara rushed to the house, and when they walked into the house, they noticed that Erika was lying dead on the bathroom floor. When Taylin's children arrived, she showed them the body of Erika, told them that she had died, and that they needed to help her get rid of the body. So she literally made her own children. Kiara was just 17 at the time, and then she had two younger brothers who barely even remember this incident. They made her put her in a garbage can, and they kept her basically in the garage for a couple days in their home. Now, after a couple days had passed by, Taylin was really getting skeptical at this point because of the smell of her decomposing body. And the way that she actually explained it to her children was that we need to move her body because we don't want an elderly person to find her and have a heart attack. Very odd logic there. Anyway. So the children did as the mother said, and they helped her load Erika's body that was inside of this garbage bag. They loaded her up into her van, and that's when they drove all the way to Gary, Indiana from Wisconsin to dispose of her body. I guess after this incident of the situation with Erika and helping her mother move her body, she was severely, traumatized by that situation. So later on in about 2015, she actually started seeing a therapist, and when she told the therapist this story of what had happened, the therapist highly recommended to her that you need to come forward, you need to tell the authorities. So that is where the Jane Doe eventually became Erika Hill. Kiara told the police officers that throughout the torture of Erika, she was rarely allowed to eat. She was beaten and abused on a daily basis, and when the bruises and the wounds were really bad, that's when she would pull her kids out of school for a long period of time. So she wasn't even able to get a proper education because she was constantly getting pulled out of school to hide the fact that she was being abused. When officers asked Kiara if her and her brothers were abused, Kiara did come forward stating that the mother did in fact abuse them as well, but that Erika actually got the brunt of it all. And the reason behind it that she was stating is because Erika was the grandmother's favorite, and I guess Taylin didn't like that very much. So she basically took out all of her anger and all of her aggression primarily out on Erika as opposed to the other kids, but they did get abused. So Taylin was actually obviously under investigation for the murder of her niece, and this is where the timeline gets a little funky because this is where kind of background information now comes in. So an anonymous man came forward after he had realized that this woman, Erika Hill, who had been identified as a murder victim, decided to come forward to authorities. Now, this man still decides to remain anonymous until this day, so information on him isn't out there. This anonymous man had come forward after Erika Hill had finally been confirmed as the identity of this Jane Doe, and he had a lot of information to state as well. This man told the police that he was the brother of Taylin Hill and that they shared the same father. I'm not sure if they shared the same mother. When they were younger, he decided to move to the South, so he eventually moved to South Carolina, leaving Wisconsin where Taylin and her family remained. And after the grandmother had passed away, this anonymous man actually came forward and went to Erika and offered her to live with him. So he offered her to move to South Carolina and basically start a whole new life there with him and his family, and that he would, you know, have full custody of her and take care of her. But unfortunately, Erika decided to stay in Wisconsin. She didn't want to move to the South. She specifically wanted to stay in Wisconsin because Taylin was like a sister to her. Erika literally told this anonymous family member that the woman who murdered her was like a sister to her. That just absolutely rips me apart, just hearing that bit of information. But at the time that Erika decided to live with Taylin as opposed to this anonymous family member, he said, okay, that's fine. He grew up with Taylin and knew that she also had suffered, you know, sexual abuse, and she was abused as a child as well. But as an adult, to him, she seemed like she was kind of a normal, you know, functioning person, and that she in no way, shape, or form could have hurt anybody, nonetheless her own children. She was actually known in the community as being a, you know, daily churchgoer. She was very heavily involved in the church community, and she actually worked with special needs students in the education system. And he was like, you know what, all right, if you want to live with her, that's fine. There were no signs of abuse from her. Like, she literally seemed like she was a fine person to hold custody of Erika. Now, this is where things get a little bit confusing. This anonymous family member basically told authorities when they asked him that he had no idea that she was being abused because after she adopted Erika, they essentially fell off the face of the earth. He tried to get into contact with them. He tried to contact them if he was visiting in Wisconsin. He wanted to be a part of her life. I mean, like, he even offered her to move to the South with him. Like, he wanted to be a part of Erika's life, but as soon as she was adopted, he couldn't get a hold of her. And that's because Taylin's real name actually wasn't Taylin at the time. It was Marie Hill. And Marie Hill actually changed her name to Taylin Hill in like the mid-2000s. So when this anonymous family member even tried to search for her, he couldn't find her because she changed her name. And it's really sad reading about this family member because he blames himself for a lot of what happened. he basically said if only he, you know, pushed a little bit harder to have Erika come and live with him in the South as opposed to moving in with Taylin or Marie. And I see where it is that he's coming from, but judging from what he said, it perfectly matched the description of Taylin to what the community also said. You know, the community said that there's no way that this woman is abusing her kids. There's no way that this amazing woman who is a part of the church and works in the public education system with children with special needs, like, there was no way that this woman could be abusing her family. And, you know, if the signs aren't there, and then if you couldn't find communication, even if you were trying to, you know, he tried, and it's just, it's so sad knowing that he just had no idea of the trauma that this girl was going to face. She was arrested for the murder of her niece and was taken to trial. And what's crazy too is that her kids actually remained loyal throughout the whole trial. They claimed that they were not abused by their mother and that their mother never hurt them, but that she did hurt Erika, but that their mother didn't abuse them the way that she had abused Erika. So they even mentioned how they knew it was wrong, the way that they hurt her all the time and the way that she would treat Erika. Like, the kids knew that it was wrong. It's interesting how the two younger kids said that, you know, their mom didn't abuse them, especially the way that she abused Erika. But Kiara, Taylin's other daughter, the one that came forward, was like, no, she was a horrendously abusive woman, but she primarily took it out on Erika, but she definitely took it out on us too. You know, they missed a ton of school because of it. They were pulled out of school, put back into school, constantly being moved around, and it was very obvious that they were also abused too. Now, Taylin Hill, the woman who murdered her niece, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for the murder of 15-year-olds Erika Hill. And in my opinion, 20 years is not enough for this just foul crime that she had committed. She abused this girl for years, and then she eventually murdered her. She starved her. She literally abused her so bad that the kids said she was gray. Like, obviously there was child neglect. She murdered her. She was a garbage human being. She was an absolute monster. And 20 years for something just so awful, in my opinion, it just doesn't sit right with me. That is someone who should be rotting in prison, honestly, for the rest of her life. But that's just my personal opinion on this. Now, Kiara, who did come forward to stating, you know, that she did help her mother in disposing of the body, didn't actually get sentenced to anything, just for the fact that, you know, they did investigate and they did come to the conclusion that she was so fearful of what would happen to her if she did come forward that, you know, she wasn't actually a part of the abuse. So that basically completes this case. Taylin's now in prison, and this poor girl, Erika, who just got put into such an awful situation after her grandmother died, you know, and she had no idea going in that she was going to be suffering the way that she suffered. And the fact that her story, it's just not told enough, you know, her voice was just completely lost in this entire case. And it just absolutely breaks my heart that this isn't a very well-known case. Basically, the detectives, you know, they said that every crime will eventually be solved, and all it does take is just that one person coming forward. So, you know, unfortunately, Kiara was a part of this horrendous situation, but if Kiara never came forward, who knows where Taylin would have ended up? Who knows the people that she could have hurt, and just the continued abuse that would have gone on if Kiara didn't end up, you know, standing up for herself and finally putting this story to an end. So yeah, that completes today's case. It's confusing, it's frustrating, it's heartbreaking, but I just feel like it was an important story to share for you guys. If you guys like this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. It actually does help me out. It helps the videos get shown more. It helps these stories be told more to a wider spread audience, so I would really appreciate it. And if you guys are not subscribed, then definitely subscribe to my channel so you guys can see more cases and more videos. And yeah, that completes today's video. I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye guys!